Hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back. It's the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Joining us now is one of my favorite guests to have on the James Show. That's partially because I agree with him so much, but he's better at saying stuff than me because he's an author, comedian, writer, all kinds of good stuff. Welcome back, Evan Sayet, to the James Show. And we're in the middle of I really hate the term, but it's kind of caught on, so now I'm forced to use it. The Veep Stakes. We're supposed to find out because Kamala has an event tomorrow that's supposed to be the first public event with her new VP pick, but we don't know who the VP pick is, so I'm assuming it's going to happen soon. Who do you think it's going to be?
Oh, boy. That's obviously the question, and what's interesting is not who it's going to be, but why it's not going to be the others.
Right.
I mean, right, whether it's Josh the Jew, well, you can't do that because the Democratic Party is the party of Jew haters, you know.
But they need Pennsylvania, so they can't. Look, they have almost no path to victory without Pennsylvania, and so they have a strong push to pick him. But the Jew question, really, that's going to hurt your ticket to put a Jewish person on there? What does that say about your party?
Well, the Democrat Party is the party of Jew hatred by definition. I mean, you go back to my unified theory of leftism, of liberalism, and it's the indiscriminateness that they don't discriminate between right and wrong, good and evil, better and worse, truth and lies. And Judaism is the philosophy, the ideology, the religion of discriminating between right and wrong, good and evil, better and worse, truth and lies. I mean, God, by definition, is discriminating. This is what he commands. This is what he commands not to do. And thus, it's not just Judaism, but because it's Judeo-Christianity, and in fact, Western civilization as a whole, that is despised by the political left, and thus they may, I mean, I don't really know if they would or wouldn't nail Pennsylvania because they picked this popular politician from Pennsylvania, but then they're going to lose Michigan because the
Muslim vote, yeah,
is simply not going to, you know, when they consider the Jew to be the infidel, the great Satan, the biggest evil in the world, people who they will go to heaven if they kill. You're not going to win Michigan, and it's just as important for the Democrats to win Michigan as it is for them to win Pennsylvania. So I think Josh is out.
Yeah, and you know, we should just stress that harder. And I don't mean me and you, but I just mean people as a whole. The connection, because we hyphenate it so easily, the Judeo-Christian morals and beliefs. That's what was so fun about the story in Louisiana where the governor signed a bill that said they got to put the 10 Commandments in every classroom because the argument was, no, you can't be forcing Christianity upon everyone. Who said that was Christian specific? The Jews also have the same 10 Commandments. So that's not the endorsement of any religion if you're using a code of ethics that spans across at least two. So, yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah, two of the big three, indeed. And even then, it has been determined multiple times by the Supreme Court, going all the way up to the Supreme Court, that the Ten Commandments are historical documents, not merely religious documents, but historical documents. And thus, there's no reason not to have the very basis of Western civilization as part of the classroom setting, especially if you're talking about the alternative is what? The gay pride parade, the LGBTQ plus flags?
Yeah, Jenny has two dads or whatever.
Right, indeed. Okay, so Josh Shapiro, and it might, if Shapiro's last name were something other than Shapiro, but you know, you can't hide Shapiro. Even my friend who tried to hide and called himself Shapiro didn't fool anyone. And so who else is there? I mean, you're going to go to Kentucky. They're not going to give up a Democrat governor in a Republican state, so he's out. I don't think that
Tim Walz.
Martelli is much beloved.
What about Tim Walz?
You know what? I think the less somebody is known, the better their chance. Because the more a Democrat is known, the more they are disliked.
Well, they do need Minnesota, and is he the current or former governor of Minnesota? I haven't really nailed it down. I saw that he's a billionaire. Do I have that right? Or am I thinking of the wrong guy?
But I don't have anything against billionaires. I wish I were one. I'm voting for one.
No, that would help. They need the money.
They're going to do just fine for the money. Minnesota, they do need it, and they came very close to losing it, and they might lose it this time. I'm still of the belief that this is going to be a Trump landslide. And even as Kamala is going through her honeymoon, she's barely picking up. I mean, she's up by a half a point here or a half a point there from Biden. But if this is her honeymoon, wait until we actually get to know her. The problem is she's going to run a campaign just like Biden did, except Biden was able to run that hide in the basement campaign for a year and a half, whereas Kamala only has to hide in the basement for a couple more weeks, and just turn it over to the mainstream media and let them cover up for all of Kamala's extremism and failures.
Can you stay with me for another second, Evan?
I would love to, James.
All right. More with Evan Sayet, author and comedian, when we return on the James Show. If you want to jump in the conversation at any time, just pretend like we're at a bar having drinks and you're sitting next to us and we're like, oh, well, I was just overhearing you talking about XYZ. Feel free to jump in. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. We'll continue talking about election 2024 with Evan Sayet on the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey, welcome. It's the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. If you want to jump in on the conversation, 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. We talked about in the last hour, the big stories are the economy. The stock market is just laid a big fat egg today. Just totally you-know-whatted the bed. On top of that, we have what looks to be an Iranian airstrike on an Iraqi Air Force base that also has American soldiers in it. So we could have just had an active war kicking off World War III. Yay, isn't that fun? And on top of that, we have the most malignant tumor of an election that you've ever seen in your entire life. And we're continuing to cover it all with my guest, Evan Sayet of evansayet.com. Now, Evan, I want to move to another piece of info here. There's a poll from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They're a First Amendment focused nonprofit. 28% of Americans reported that the First Amendment goes too far in the rights it guarantees. Now, we do a lot of pointing out propaganda and falsehoods in the media, but for 28% of America, they're buying it, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, that's really terrifying. There truly is no love of freedom any longer. There's this concept that we are the children and the government are the experts. And in fact, you even hear people on the political left say, don't do your own research. You can't do your own research. Doing your own research, you're going to come up with the wrong answer because you're not smart enough. And so you literally have to trust in other establishments, whether it was Nazi Germany, well, you trusted the government. Whether it was communist China, you trusted the government. Whether it was the Soviet Union, you trusted the government. And we are moving towards that where we no longer trust ourselves. We no longer trust our freedoms. We no longer trust the very American experiment of self-governance. And self-governance includes freedom of speech. And thus, you're going to have other people deciding not only what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to drive, where you're allowed to go, what medicines you must take. It's going to go totally across the board. And what's funny, not funny, but telling, is that over the last several iterations of the political left, we went not all that long ago from Barack Obama, who still had to be somewhat subtle. He still had to say fundamental change. And then we got to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Goldberg is a journalist, but Bernie Sanders, who doesn't even hide the fact that he's talking revolution. And now you have people coming out and saying they are, in fact, socialists. And that socialism includes a denial of the right to free speech.
Well, we already have a problem in the White House with the Iranian, well, assumed to be Iranian strikes today against the Iraqi air base with the American soldiers in it. The concern that I want to run by you is, even if he has the right policy, just in the camera shot of him walking from across the lawn to the helicopter to go to the Situation Room or whatever he was doing, he walks like a toddler, and it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Policy matters. But you have to think, if you're one of the people overseas who hates America, that sort of emboldens you to strike. I mean, this last 6 months might be a time for you to hold on to your hat.
Well, now would be the time, because you know that if Trump does retake the presidency, and we do have a second Trump administration, that our enemies know that we are not going to put up with their BS, which is too light a term for what it is. I mean, there's a reason that for the 4 years that Trump was president, we didn't have the Russians invading Ukraine, that we didn't have Hamas murdering and then kidnapping. And by the way, kidnapping Americans. You don't hear this. It was, during the Carter administration, we were counting how many days the Iranians held our citizens hostage. Well, it's getting pretty close to a year, well over 300 days that the Iranian proxy, Hamas, has been holding Americans, and you don't hear this at all. It's very much a second coming of the Carter administration, except worse still, during the Carter administration, you at least had an American citizenry that loved America. In our modern time, you have a second Carter presidency, weakness everywhere, moral weakness, military weakness, economic weakness, but you also have soldiers, social justice warriors who did not exist back in the 70s, who they have manufactured in the schools and elsewhere, who now actually are on the side of those who take Americans hostage, those who kill Jews, those who are about to start a war. And so it's a very terrifying time, not just because of the bad policy, but because we now have an electorate that, as you say, 26%, 28%.
28, yeah.
Yeah, that's just freedom of speech. Now you get into some of the other issues, like do they support the terrorists? The number goes up from there. And so, yeah, the next couple of months, you're going to see some real terrible things going on, because they know it's now or perhaps never. I mean, obviously, if Kamala wins, they've got 4 more years to be aggressive against Western civilization and all the freedoms that Western civilization entails. But if Trump wins, that's the end of their efforts. Our enemies.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the comparison you were making to Jimmy Carter, because if you do take it out, like in 1980, what were we dealing with? The high price of gas, there was rampant inflation, unemployment was on the way up, the stock market was convulsing, the Olympics were a big deal. So that's more of a comparison than I hoped we'd be at this point. But there was an election in 1980, and that didn't really work out for the party in power. Will it be different this time?
I don't think so. I don't know that we will ever again have the kind of landslides that we saw with Richard Nixon in 72 or with Ronald Reagan in 80 and then again in 84. We're a different and much more divided nation. Back then we were a nation that everybody loved America, but we had some differences in how best to become a better nation. And typically that was a percentage of what the tax rate would be. It was a matter of degrees. Now you have one party that hates America and one party that loves America. And by the way, the big divide in the United States is not between North and South. It's not between red states and blue states. It's really between city and everybody else. And there's a big reason for that, and that is the cities comprised of the very rich, the very, very rich, the very, very, very rich, and the very, 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 very rich, and the very poor. And the very rich and the very, very rich, et cetera, they can buy their way out of the failures. When the Democrats destroyed the public schools, the rich don't care because their kids go to private schools. When the streets are violent in Democrat-run cities, the rich don't care because they live in gated communities with private security guards. All right? And the very, very, very poor simply cannot afford to leave, and so they vote Democrat because of the government helping hand. And so only the people who either are saved from the failures of the Democrats by their riches, or simply must depend on the government because they are that poor, vote Democrat, and everybody else in America votes Republican. Everybody.
That's just beautiful. Evan Sayet, how can they find you outside of the James Show?
Well, I want them to all buy my books. Go to Amazon.com. Of course, you can find me at Evan Sayet, EVAN, S as in Sam, AYET.com.
Yeah, and start off with the Kindergarten of Eden, how modern liberals think, and then you can move through the other two. Thank you again. Evan Sayet, Sayet. Just wanted to say it again. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Of course. Talk soon.
See, wasn't that good? He flows, man. It's like listening to a rapper. Coming up next, Spencer McGowan, host of Net Worth Radio, is going to update you on what happened to your IRA today, because it's an absolute bloodbath. That's next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.